Have you ever met someone so completely self-absorbed that you wondered, were they born this way, or did something make them like this? It is a fascinating question that gets to the heart of a personality trait we see more and more: narcissism. So, is it in our genes, or is it something we learn? Let's dive deep into the age-old debate of nature versus nurture when it comes to narcissism. First, let's be clear about what we're talking about. We're not just discussing someone who posts a lot of selfies. We're talking about narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD, which is a clinical diagnosis. It's characterized by a deep-seated need for admiration, a profound lack of empathy for others, and an inflated sense of self-importance. People with NPD often believe they are superior and deserve special treatment, which can cause significant problems in their relationships and daily life. So, where does this complex pattern come from? Let's start with the nature side of the argument. Research into the genetics of personality is a booming field, and it has some compelling things to say about narcissism. Twin studies are particularly insightful here. You see, by comparing identical twins, who share 100% of their DNA, with fraternal twins, who share about 50%, researchers can estimate how much of a particular trait is inherited. Several of these studies have found a significant genetic component to narcissism. Some estimates suggest that heritability, the degree to which genetic differences account for differences in a trait, can be as high as 50% for narcissistic traits. This means that yes, you can be born with a genetic predisposition that makes you more likely to develop narcissistic tendencies. Think of it like having a genetic predisposition for high cholesterol. It doesn't guarantee you'll have it, but it does mean you might need to be more mindful of your diet and lifestyle. Similarly, certain inherited temperament traits can lay the groundwork for narcissism. For example, a child who is naturally more reactive, has a higher need for attention, or is more aggressive might be more vulnerable to developing narcissistic patterns later on, especially depending on how their environment responds to these traits. Scientists are even looking at specific genes and brain structures. Some studies have linked narcissistic traits to variations in genes related to a brain chemical called dopamine, which is involved in reward and pleasure. Neurologically, brain imaging studies have shown that people with NPD may have differences in brain regions associated with empathy, like the anterior insula. So, the biological evidence is pretty strong. Our DNA and brain wiring do play a role. It seems that nature definitely loads the gun. But if nature loads the gun, it's often nurture that pulls the trigger. This is where the environment, our upbringing, culture, and life experiences comes into play. This side of the argument is just as, if not more, compelling. Many psychological theories point directly to early childhood experiences as the primary breeding ground for narcissism. One prominent theory suggests that narcissism can be a defense mechanism that develops in response to early childhood neglect or abuse. Imagine a child who is consistently ignored, criticized, or made to feel that their needs are unimportant. To cope with the deep feelings of worthlessness and emotional pain, the child might unconsciously create a protective shell, a false, grandiose self. This is the I am special, I am perfect, I don't need anyone persona that we see in an adult narcissist. It's a survival strategy. The inflated ego is a desperate attempt to counter the inner voice that says, I am not good enough. In this view, the arrogance is a mask for profound insecurity and shame that was instilled in them long ago. The lack of empathy also makes sense. If you were never shown consistent empathy, how would you learn to show it to others? But it's not just neglect that can lead to narcissism. The opposite can also be true: excessive praise and overvaluation. This is the spoiled child theory. When parents consistently tell their child they are more special, more talented, and more important than everyone else, without grounding this praise in real achievement or teaching them humility, it can create a sense of entitlement. If a child is never allowed to fail, never held accountable for their mistakes, and taught that they are above the rules, they can grow up truly believing it. They learn that they deserve admiration and special treatment simply for existing. This creates what's called overt or grandiose narcissism, where the person is outwardly arrogant and demanding. This is different from the covert or vulnerable narcissist, who may have stemmed from the neglectful background and whose insecurity is a bit closer to the surface. So, we have two very different parenting paths, one of coldness and one of excessive indulgence, that can both lead to the same destination. And let's not forget the broader cultural context. We live in an age that many have called the age of narcissism. Social media platforms, for instance, are perfectly designed to feed narcissistic tendencies. They are built around self-promotion, public validation through likes and followers, and the curation of a perfect, idealized life. It creates a competitive environment where our value can feel tied to our online popularity. Reality TV often celebrates dramatic, self-centered personalities. The me-first attitude is sometimes even lauded in the business world as a recipe for success. When our culture constantly bombards us with the message that fame, wealth, and attention are the ultimate goals, is it any surprise that narcissistic traits are on the rise? This cultural environment can act as an incubator, taking a person with a slight genetic predisposition or a tricky upbringing and fanning those narcissistic flames. So, after looking at all this, what's the verdict? Nature or nurture? The truth, as is often the case with complex human behavior, is that it's not an either-or answer. It's both. The most accepted model today is the biopsychosocial model, which recognizes that narcissism arises from a complex interplay of genetic predispositions, psychological factors like early upbringing, psycho, and social and cultural influences, social. Think of it as a recipe. Your genes might be the ingredients you start with. Maybe you have the flour and sugar that could make a cake. Your childhood upbringing is the chef who mixes those ingredients. Do they follow a good recipe, or do they mess it up, adding too much sugar or not enough of something else? And finally, the culture you live in is the oven. It provides the environment that bakes the final product. A different oven temperature can result in a very different cake, even with the same ingredients and mixing. So, a person might have the genetic vulnerability, experience a childhood that fosters insecurity or entitlement, and then live in a society that rewards self-absorption. All these factors combine and reinforce each other, leading to the development of a full-blown narcissistic personality. This understanding is incredibly important because it changes how we view narcissism. It moves us away from simply labeling someone as bad and helps us see them as a person who is, in many cases, a product of a complex and often painful history. It doesn't excuse harmful behavior, of course. We still need to protect ourselves and set boundaries. But it does allow for a more compassionate, nuanced understanding. It also gives us hope. While we can't change our genes, we can change our behaviors, our parenting styles, and even our cultural values. We can learn to foster genuine self-esteem in our children based on effort and kindness, rather than unearned praise. We can promote empathy and community over a ruthless, me-first attitude. Understanding the roots of narcissism is the first step towards healing, both for individuals and for our society as a whole. Thank you so much for watching and for joining me on this deep dive. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. Do you think nature or nurture plays a bigger role? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this helpful, please give this video a like. In my next video, we're going to get very practical and detail the specific signs that someone in your life might be a narcissist, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. I'll see you on the healing path in the next video.